Hey everybody, hope and pray that you're doing well. Today as we come to our word from the Word. And today that word is application. Application. Now, a lot of what we're dealing with this week, too, is still going on like last week in the book of Job. And we're just kind of highlighting the conversations, the back and forth. And for the most part, we're just going to have uh, one day, one of our sessions here. We'll just do that on one of the speeches, and then we'll go back to how that one responds or how Job responds to them. Or I'll tell you, he's got some great friends here that are trying to share with him their thoughts, and we'll find out in the end. If you've read the book of Job before, you know how it ends, and you know who ends up being justified in the end and who ends up being proven wrong. And spoiler alert, Job was right all along, for the most part. There's still some times that God has to speak to him and say, Job, don't get too big for your britches there. And so he kind of has to humble him down a little bit with that. But today, I want us to see the application of God's word and the application of truth. Now, you'll see one in particular, you see Bildad speak today, and he speaks some truth, but it's only, I guess we'll say it's only partial truth. In other words, he focuses in on one of the aspects of the character of God, and that being especially his justice, and then he forgets and leaves out grace and mercy. Now, I don't know about you, but I am thankful that we serve a just God, but I am also just as glad that we serve a merciful and a gracious God. And even as his friends here are trying to help him, notice what Bildad says. And I can just see us doing this too, trying to help somebody in a difficult time. And think about being in this situation. One, from Job's vantage point, but also try to be his friends. Maybe you've had some friends before and you're like, I'm telling you, look, all this stuff that's going on in your life, it must be because of some sin. Maybe there's something you need to get straight before God. And that's essentially the background of the three friends and the basis of all their arguments. But today in Job chapter 8, looking at the first 7 verses today, it says, Then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, How long will you speak these things, and the words of your mouth be like a strong wind? Does God subvert judgment? Or does the Almighty pervert justice? If your sons have sinned against him, he has cast them away for their transgression. If you would earnestly seek God and make your supplication to the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, surely now he would awake for you and prosper your rightful dwelling place. Though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. Now, this is one that I love to point out, the fact that Bildad had a lot of truth there at the end. They didn't realize it. Job's ending was going to be greater. His ending was going to be greater than his beginning. But at the time, that's not what he needed to hear. And did you catch what he said? I mean, he tells this man, Job, who has just lost everything, essentially. He tells him, well, hey, don't worry. Your kids probably just sinned, and that was probably the judgment of God. That's why he killed them all. I mean, that's essentially what he's telling his friend. Now, I don't know about you, but, yesterday we were talking about in our Sunday service, talking about the fact that we should be comforting others, right? Comforting others with the truth of God's word. I don't find a lot of comfort from Job's friends. A lot of times it was accusations, and a lot of times it was, you'll see Job saying, look, if these are all the friends I have, then what in the world? Y'all are making me a laughing stock. You're making me feel worse. But I wonder today if we don't do the same thing that his friends are doing. That if we don't take parts, bits and pieces of the truth of God's word, but yet we don't apply them correctly. I mean, it'd be a lot like getting a prescription for some type of medicine, or even a ointment or something that you needed to put on your skin, or whatever the case may be. Well, you think about if I had a cut on my finger, but then I take it and the application, I'm going to take a cast and put it on my other arm or on my other leg. Okay, well, that cast might be great for a broken bone, but if that's not what I have, then the application was wrong. I wasn't fixing the problem. And see, I think with Job's friends, they thought that Job wouldn't admit what the problem was. He wouldn't admit the ailment. But the truth is that he was blameless in the sight of God. Not perfect, not sinless, but blameless in the sight of God. You know from the beginning of the book of Job that he's the one that essentially, God is the one that allows Satan to do these things to him, partially just to prove a point. But also it strengthens Job's faith, and it makes him a character that we're still talking about today in the way that he stayed faithful. And by the end of this week, you're going to see probably one of the most famous statements in the book of Job of what Job says, even in the midst of his pain. But today, how will you apply God's word? Right? I encourage you to be reading along with us, but I wonder, how would you apply these truths to your life today? How could you apply that maybe to the way that you comfort others? Maybe to the way that you bring God's truth to their lives? But most importantly, how do you apply God's word to your life? Do you even apply it? Or do you just read it and say, man, that's a great truth? Man, love your neighbor as yourself. Man, that's a great truth, but we don't even go out and try it. Sunday school yesterday, we were talking about being forgiving, right? We've been talking about how to deal with our neighbors, but especially to be forgiving. If we say, oh, that's a great truth that we need to forgive everybody, not just 7 times, but 7 times 70 times. But if we don't apply it, then what are we doing? So today, what does your application of God's word look like? God bless you, and I pray you have a great, great day.